Welcome to the Equity Teacher Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rachael Mahmood. In this podcast, we'll dive into the stories, the voices, and the expertise of incredible teacher leaders who are making a difference through the equity work they do in their classrooms and their communities. Welcome to another episode of Equity Teacher Leader. I am super excited. Today we have Seth Brady on the podcast with us. Welcome, Seth.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, super excited to have you on the podcast. I've been following you on LinkedIn for such a long time and seeing all the amazing things that you're doing. And I absolutely knew we have to get together and we have to talk because I am dying to learn from you.
Yeah, we're neighbors too, at least district neighbors.
That is true. Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll jump into a great conversation today.
Yeah, so I'd say, like, in a nutshell, I've been a social studies teacher at Naperville Central for, believe it or I can't believe it, 22 years. Taught a wide variety of courses during that time, and just three children all went through high school or went through the K-12, and just enjoying life these days.
Yeah, and I think you're definitely enjoying life because you just got a huge award, right? The Horace Mann Award for Teaching Excellence in 2024.
Yeah, it was a pretty neat experience.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that award. I don't know too much about it except for the fact it's a huge deal.
So that's through, like, the IEA NEA. You become a IEA sort of teacher of the year, and then among those they pick 5 in the nation. It's kind of a neat experience because they call it like the Golden Globes or the Emmys of the teaching world, and to just see the incredible educators in that room were just a special experience.
It's amazing. And you were a finalist for the Illinois Teacher of the Year back in 2015. You're a Fulbright Scholar. You were a District 203 Teacher of the Year. So just so many accolades. Tell us a little bit about your community.
So, Naperville Central is actually the oldest school in Naperville, but you wouldn't know it. It's now, about 2,500 students, diverse identities, predominantly white. And what I experienced being a staff member there and sort of comparing it with my high school experiences, it's just like a great deal of warmth between the faculty, among students and faculty, and just a real commitment to student belonging on the behalf of staff across the board. It's nice to meet a community of parents and students and educators that are just really committed to the students and every student reaching their highest potential.
I love that. And of course, it's like right in downtown Naperville, which is
Yeah,
so beautiful.
I've always thought about, like, lunch period because we're right by the river walk.
Yes. Do you go
Yeah.
down to the river walk for lunch?
Times, not as much as I should. Like,
Oh
you
my
you
gosh.
sort of are, like, in the grind,
Yeah, no, we all know about the grind. I'm lucky if I make it out of my classroom for lunch. So one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about was this Illinois Global Scholars Program. It's all over your LinkedIn profile. It's all over the internet when somebody Googles you. I don't know what it is, but I also know that it's a big deal and it's something that makes some of your teaching special, right?
Yeah, I appreciate the question because I think Illinois Global Scholar is too guarded of a secret, and I wish it wasn't
Oh,
a secret. So I appreciate you
please
outing it. Yeah.
tell us all
Um,
your
so
secrets.
what's really cool about Global Scholar is essentially a group of educators together wanted to expand global education opportunities for students across Illinois, and really, like, took an initiative to gather together a wide coalition that reflected the geographic and ethnic diversity of the state, brought those folks together and said, hey, what requirements are we going to build, and how are students going to actually demonstrate that they have this global competency? So we were lucky enough to, like, secure grants to bring those folks together to write out what that certificate would look like. It ended up being that students have to complete 8 globally focused courses, engage in globally focused service learning, connect with people abroad, usually virtually through dialogue or collaboration. And then really the anchor of it is the Capstone course that students do in order to receive it. Once we had that in mind, we as teachers like drew upon community and fellow teachers and worked that through the legislature and passed a law so that, much like the seal of biliteracy, it's a special seal that demonstrates global competency on the student transcript.
That's amazing. So, I have a high schooler at home, just starting the whole high school process. He's taking AP Human Geo right now, his favorite course. Can he become an Illinois Global Scholar? Can like any student apply, or do you need like a school that's already participating in the program? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's a sort of yes and no, and a
Oh,
question I get a lot. So the way the certificate was originally designed is essentially the school adopts it, and then using guidance, they sort of run it internally. So my first reaction to that is talk to your department chairs in social studies and world language, talk to your superintendent and say, hey, the sort of outcomes that students are getting in other schools with this program, I want that for my children, and push for that. The other thing that we actually just a year ago, realizing that there are a lot of obstacles to make this happen in a district,
right.
and that not every district would have the resources to do it,
Mm.
we've set up an online pathway that students can get the certificate and do the capstone online. So there is now going to be, I think, it'll start in 2027.
That sounds amazing. So, if schools or teachers listening to the podcast were like, hey, we want to start something like that in our school, start with your superintendent, let them know where else can they find more information about it?
So we definitely have a website, which is global-illinois, or you can email me directly. So we really, work closely with schools because we believe in this. So it's a worthy labor of love to like help a district.
What are some of the benefits that you've seen for students who are participating in that Illinois Global Scholars Program or doing that coursework in the capstone?
So pretty much what they need to do is think about who they are as a person,
Mm.
in their interests, and tell the story of self that makes them arrive at a particular type of question. And that question is not only broadly inquiry, but they need to come up with a question related to a global issue that's actionable. Once they come up with that question, there's a research process. As part of that research process, they actually have to connect with people on the ground who are familiar with both the issue and the context. So a question that students done in the past is, what is the best way to prevent a future Ebola outbreak in
Wow.
Sierra Leone? And they connected with like volunteers who worked in Ebola hospitals as well as Doctors Without Borders
So
doctors.
this is the capstone project that you're describing.
Yeah, yeah. So for me and for most Global Scholar schools, it's a semester long class
Mm.
where they're doing essentially one project the entire time. So as a teacher, you can really support them through this process. But once they sort of finish the research project, they have to create an artifact that they can take into action to affect real change in the real world. So the Ebola example, and what's kind of neat about it, students, like once they do that much work, they want to make a change.
Yeah, of
And so
course.
she was like, well, maybe I'll make a video. And she's like, nah, that's not going to change anything. So she had some coding background, and she coded this game where it's sort of choose your own adventure, where the player is a doctor and an Ebola outbreak has just begun in the country, and they have to make decisions related to the factors that cause Ebola. So
That's
in
amazing.
Sierra Leone, they touched the dead at funerals. They believed it was a hoax, which seemed strange before COVID. Now it makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense. And she actually deployed this game in Sierra Leone classrooms. So there's pictures of little kids playing her game, and she did a pre-test and a post-test and was able to demonstrate that playing this game changed attitudes and behaviors about Ebola. So what do you think
Holy
about
smoly, this is
that
a
growth? Yeah.
high school student doing this.
That
This is amazing.
my mantra, like, so, the like kind of crazy thing about it is like we spent all this time designing it, and when we actually had to do it, that was scary, right? Like we're going to do real inquiry. And I had, like kind of recruited a assistant superintendent at ISP to help us. And I would call her all the time going like, how is this going to happen? Like, how are we? And she'd be like, trust the process, trust the process. But my mantra became like, when you set students free, they do amazing
Oh,
things
yes,
and
for sure.
over amazing things, which I'm sure you see in your practice too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even though I teach the littles, right,
Yeah.
we still challenge them to do small like advocacy projects. I did a unit on cultural appropriation with my students in our Native American unit. And one of their projects was to come up with a way to repair harm done to Native people. So kids
Oh,
were everything from we're going to write, like protest letters, or we're going to start a petition to even changed like the mascot for Waubonsie Valley High School. They were like,
yeah.
to make the
Incredible.
mascot more culturally sensitive. Some kids wanted to get rid of the mascot because these were students that were going to go to Waubonsie, and so even fourth and fifth graders can have that. I remember one day it was like Earth Day or something. And I said something about, picking the right social justice tool. And the kids were like, can we go outside and protest? And they made like little signs. We went out there for 15 minutes and we held up our signs that said, like, protect the earth, honk for the earth, like, do
Well,
something
that's
green
awesome.
today. And the kids were just lined up, like, outside the road, just like holding their signs. But they have to start practicing somewhere, right? So when they get to the Global Scholars Program or they get to college, they can implement their
Did they get
advocacy.
honks? Did they get
They
plenty of
did. They got a
honks?
lot,
Yeah.
even though we're on a side street, but in a subdivision.
Yeah.
But it was just the practicing of like in a mini sense, not a whole semester, but like in a mini sense, what can you create in this moment to level your agency, right? And from a fifth grader or fourth grader's point of view at the level that I teach, these were big things. And these are like the first time they were doing some of these things. And so I can write a letter to the principal of Waubonsie. I can create a
Yeah.
petition and walk around and have people sign it. I can make a sign and hold it up for something I believe in. Absolutely. So just kind
Yeah.
of
I mean,
introductory
agency
things.
agency is something you have to like, practice to sort of realize you have that capacity. Like the sooner the better. Like that's a just if you think about like just what it means to get that honk when you've got the sign out there, or like have a principal, which seems like so beyond you, especially as a little kid, respond. It's got to be so motivating to your students.
It really is. And I think that you hit the nail on the head. Maybe like in elementary school, I might give them the problem or give them the frame. Like next week, we're talking about accessible playground equipment. And so I will say, like, this is the context. We're going to research it. We're going to go outside. We're going to look at our playground equipment. We're going to evaluate what it looks like. And then the kids are going to try to come up with some kind of way to advocate for more accessible playground equipment. But I could see like as they get older, right? Like thinking it more about like what are the topics that you're passionate about and how can we start to drive our own inquiry. Not we do inquiry in the younger grades as well, but it's different because their scope is just so much smaller. It's harder for them to
Yeah.
come up with ideas, of what kind of injustice that they're seeing and what exactly they're advocating for. So it's more like introducing them to a bunch of social justice tools that you could use or, start a social media campaign, write a letter, make a petition, do a protest, like having them understand, make a video. These are things that you can do.
I think you're spot on though. Like the first step in student agency is students having the ability to observe for themselves, right? Like as
Right.
teachers, we're not saying like, hey, look at this and here's exactly what you're supposed to notice. Like giving them that initial freedom to, without judgment, sort of be like, hey, what do you see? And then, where's the patterns? Where are things sort of out of sorts? Where might this, sort of fall short of what we say every day in the pledge, right? And liberty and justice for all. And I think like once students develop that, sense of observation, the next level is like really thinking about like problems are systems and understanding all the factors that contribute to it. So like in your
Absolutely.
playground example, like, like was that lesson less expensive when they purchased it? Who's the decision makers? Like how would what's the system that made this the status quo?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think for like even younger kids, like I'm still kind of in that middle grade level, just asking them very simple questions like, what's unfair here? Who's it unfair for? And giving them different scenarios because they just don't have the background knowledge of like a variety of experiences, a variety of identities, a variety of
Yeah.
abilities or disabilities yet. Unless they have it in their family or they see it in their school, or they've read about it, that's how we start to build and start to think about like the empathy for others.
Mm.
Who does the system serve and who is not served? And so
Yeah. Love
for us
that.
as elementary school teachers, we're like laying the groundwork for that. We're exposing them to all
Yeah.
different types of people and cultures and identities and all that diversity so they can start to have those people in their mind of who those people are, of like, and then we're trying to explain like fair, unfair for each one of those groups and what are the tools that you can use to help leverage that justice.
Like I couldn't do what I do with high school students if you weren't doing what you do with your age range, and even
Absolutely.
across the board.
Yeah, and it's never too early to start. I think that's one of the things I'm always having conversations with people. I've done professional development for early childhood. How do we teach social justice in early childhood classrooms? Like, where does that start? It's never too early to start, is what I tell people. And like, we can pull those books out early. I mean, you give one kid one M&M, you give the other kid two M&Ms. If they're 3 years old, first thing they're going to say is that's unfair, right? They
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
then we just frame everything around this idea of fairness. And that's just a really easy introduction. So I was going to ask you the Ebola, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about a couple more of your projects or just what kids have done? Because I'm just
Yeah.
now fascinated.
Especially some of the most high profile ones end up as legislation. I had a student whose question really started about kind of in a not really a silly way, but he was wondering like, can misinformation ever be used for a positive purpose? And that quickly resulted in the answer, not really. So that evolved over time. And he had some really incredible experts to him initiating a media literacy education law, which was passed. It was actually the nation's first media literacy ed law.
Oh, wow.
So there's been
So your
several.
student wrote one and passed one?
Yeah,
It's
actually, he's
amazing.
the first of seven that passed laws.
Oh my gosh, you have 7 students who have written and passed
Yeah,
laws.
yeah,
Okay, now you gotta fire them off right now. We need you to all 7.
yeah.
The
So
media literacy one.
one's equity report card.
Okay.
One is they have to learn about allergies in school to protect kids. Another was a mandatory naloxone opioid antagonist, or in all high schools. And she actually like ended up passing two, not on purpose. But the other one is learning about the dangers of fentanyl.
Okay, yeah. Great.
Climate change education. I think I got most of them. The last one, the most recent one, is addressing the high rate of maternal mortality among Black women in Illinois. So every single healthcare professional, thanks to her bill, now has to take a course on the impacts of the negative impacts related to maternal health and the ways in which things like implicit bias and other systemic factors contribute to that, sad result. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
blows my mind that kids are doing this. I mean, I did the Teach Plus, like teaching
Yeah.
fellowship, right? And we worked on like looking at our inequities in education and developing research and all those things and working to pass legislation. And that was a lot for a teacher, and we had like a
Yeah.
group of teachers. We weren't like in these individualized projects, meeting with legislators and creating the fact sheets and, testifying and all these things. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a big thing, finding
Oh,
sponsors,
huge. Witness slips, the whole.
all of it. Yes. So many witness slips.
Yeah.
Yes. So, wow.
And kids testify, they do all those things. I mean,
That's
the
amazing.
the one too that I think, really, kind of hit my heart this past year. Student, her name's Kyla, and she actually had her grandfather, sadly, he was the head of a school in India, and he was he was in a hit and run accident and passed away. And so her project and a lot of students' projects, really stem from like, not always, but a lot of times there's this thing in their heart that they're wrestling with that comes out in the capstone, and it's a narrative. So they tell that story. So she focused on like what can be done to address, the high rate of traffic fatalities in Punjab. So her artifact initially was, she redesigned the area in front of the school. to include things like speed bumps and signs and all the things that I guess like, I sort of take for granted, and so does
Right.
she. But the really amazing thing, Rachel, is she was like, well, I think what I'm going to do is have all the kids at that school, because they experience this, essentially their
Tragedy.
principal, right? And that the trauma of that. So
Mhm.
they all made their own letters and redesigns, right? And I'm talking like elementary, and it was sent in this huge bundle to sort of the local decision
Definitely.
makers, right?
Yeah.
So like the power to affect change in the world, to like imagine a different future and sort of make decisions in the present to bring about that is, you could just see on her face like, the feeling she got of you can't do anything, but she was felt helpless, but now she's like begun to like push for, this change that will make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and all the lessons it teaches her for every experience she has after this, right? If she can do that, then at 16, 17,
Yeah.
18 years old, think about all the things she can affect over the course of her life. And now she has a framework for how to go about and do it, right? That sounds like almost what Global Scholars gives every student is that capstone project gives them a framework to affect change. So now this is what you did here. We walked you through from the research to the advocacy to the experts or whatever it is to like what is the thing you're actually
Yeah.
doing now next time in college, in your young adulthood, in your later adulthood. Is that where we are? I
No,
don't,
no,
you
early,
know,
early, mid.
yes, of course we are. So I'm like thinking like that framework is something they can continue to replicate, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you really think about this, right? And this is where I think, equity comes into play. Agency is ultimately strongly connected to equity, right? Like the way people get ahead is figuring out how do you actually leverage the social capital in your life, the cultural capital in your life, and direct that in a way that is gonna, help you achieve your goals. And so like by doing this in a more sort of almost civic or global context, like those skills translate. I mean, I had a kid, so like when experts don't respond, I teach them to write this following up email, which is
Right.
essentially, hey, you didn't answer my question. Will you answer? And one day this kiddo comes in and he goes, hey, Mr. Ray, my counselor wasn't responding to me, but I sent them one of those following up emails. Boom, like response right away. Like, applying some of this stuff beyond like class. And I do think like the secret sauce of that class is when you ask an actionable question, the expectation is not knowledge, it's action. So like you're on the hook, and that makes you think about your learning in a different way, right? That you're actually going to do something not for me, the teacher, for the real world. And the other piece I think is the fact that you're connecting with experts on the ground, or who are familiar with context. They spend a lot of times their whole life studying this thing. And it does two things, right? It gives them that sense of confidence, like I can have a high level conversation. But I think the other thing it does is it helps to kind of ward off that, in the global context, that like Western savior complex. A lot of times kids will talk to the expert and they'll be like, yeah, that won't work in this way here. I would suggest this, this, and this. And that skill of asking for advice, most people are willing to give you advice, but learning to ask is an important skill for all students. And so my mission is like, how do you get these skills, all over our state, right? And theoretically, even beyond, because agency matters.
It does, and you're just blowing my mind. And I'm thinking about too, like from student to student, from social class to social class, from identity group to identity group. Some groups, some people have more agency than others because of where they were born, who their parents are, or even just the sense of I can affect change because I've seen my parents go in and advocate for things and things have changed for them. And I'm thinking about too, just being able to teach that explicitly to students in a course who maybe don't see their parents being able to exercise their agency, who don't have that at home. Maybe their parents feel like they never learned those skills or they've been defeated too many times. that is a leveler in itself, right? It's like we're
Yeah.
teaching this in school, so it doesn't matter where you came from or how much power your parents have in this community. We're going to teach you how to claim your power. And that sounds like a huge equalizer to bring
Yeah.
equitable outcomes for all students.
And like from the get-go, we set up Global Scholar not to be, some one more accolade for this like, high tier crowd of kids. It has nothing to do with grades. Students who have IEPs, students who are English language learners or multiple language learners, they've engaged. Yeah, I had a kiddo, Santiago's fits both of those categories, right? So he's a multiple language learner and had a IEP, and his project was about he had gone to Mexico City during COVID and ended up contracting COVID, and they wanted to open the windows so that the family when contract COVID. But the grandma's like, no, we can't open the windows because the air pollution is too bad, right? So his project was about what to do about air pollution in Mexico City. And what I tell kids sometimes is like these problems are systems. So it's not like you're out to like sort of cure cancer. You take a bite out of this problem. And what he discovers, like cooking oil is a common or cooking gas is a common method of cooking. And so like working on like awareness campaigns that sort of in the high altitude of Mexico City, that's gonna exacerbate the problem. And there are cheaper and better alternatives to that kind of cooking. So how do you get that message out through TikTok and social media and all kinds of stuff?
I'm so glad you shared that information about Mexico City because that's where I'm going for spring break this year. So
Oh,
I'm
really?
gonna go
Oh,
away
enjoy yourself.
college.
That would be awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm so happy that you shared all these examples because I've got like all the wheels turning now. And I'm thinking about, even as an elementary school teacher, how I can make connections with students, how important inquiry is, how we can use more student agency, like in the classrooms and the projects that we even do at the elementary level, middle school level, high school level. Now, most of us, we're going to go right away. All the listeners, we're going to go advocate for the Illinois Global Scholar program for our high school. We're going to go sign our kids up. I'm going to be like on the website tonight, like signing up my son, like, what can we do, to get this for him? But, for a majority of us that are probably going to fall short on resources with our school district, our own agency to push that through. Can you just share some strategies of what we could do? Like 3 things that educators can do to increase student agency or to get a little bit of that Global Scholars Capstone feel into what we're already teaching and doing? Like, what are some tweaks that we can make?
Yeah, sure. And I hope I hit the mark for elementary, right? It intrigues me. How do we do this across levels? Because you're so right about the scaffolding over time. I think the first thing, just to hit it again, is offer some space for students to observe the world in front of them. What do you see here, right? If you're looking down the hall and there's a broken drinking fountain, there's something there, right?
Right.
And then starting to think about, can you like think through what are the different factors that are contributing to this? I think there's ways to do that with young kids too. They can definitely feel the impact of a broken drinking fountain, but they could go ask like the principal or go ask custodial staff, and that might get them to budgets. So like if observing and identify is sort of one stack, on top of that comes like really think about the problem. And then on top of that stack is like, and I think you're doing this in the examples you gave too, is like, given your time and resources, where in that like system can you intervene effectively?
Mm,
And I think young people have a capacity to shift adults in a way other adults don't. So
that's
so
true.
really I think it's about slowing down with the observation and identifying. Now they're seeing with their own eyes. They're learning to cultivate that lens of like, where's the injustice? Where are things out of sorts?
Hmm.
And then like, why does this exist? And when you find out the why, then the intervention becomes like an easier process, right? You can find multiple ways to intervene based on where you are. I think listening to kids and the sorts of issues that they care about, how do you intersect the curriculum and their interests? And I think it's just so critical to slow down sort of pedagogically and listen, let them observe, and then start to build out the problem.
Every year we teach opinion writing,
Mm-hmm.
but what do we do with those letters? Right?
Yeah.
What do we do with the opinions that the kids write about? Like, where's that next step? Hopefully, we're letting them choose topics about things they're passionate about. We're letting them write their opinions. You know, they're doing all the research, they're pulling it into their essay, they're using their persuasive, word choice, whatever it is. And then that, like, essay lives in their Google Drive
Yeah.
forever. Every year I have the kids go through the social studies book and we write down all the different identities, like, where are the Black people in your social studies book? Where are the women in your social studies book? Where are the Hispanic people? The kids are like from different cultures. Like, I'm Pakistani. Great. Find the Pakistani people in the social studies book. And oftentimes the kids are like, there's no Pakistanis in our
Mm-hmm.
American history book, and I
Yeah.
remember then I like picked up the phone and I was like, you know what? I'm going to call Pearson right now. I like, Googled the number in front of the kids. I picked up the phone. I'm like, I'm going to call them and tell them.
Yeah.
I'm like, nobody's answering. Like, we're going to have to write letters, like giving them that hook. Man, those kids were just like, boom, we're going to write these letters. And I had a whole class that suffered from writing constipation. But let me tell you, you pick up a phone and tell them you're going to call the publisher and you're going
Yeah.
to, yell at them for not having all the identities of American people in the American history book. The kids are like, we're going to type to it. And then what do we do with those letters, right? Like then taking that next step and saying, okay, let's send these to Pearson then. Right.
Yeah.
Or one of the kids looked at the social studies book and he was like, this book's 10 years old. We should be writing to the school board instead.
Yeah. We're speaking to the school board, right?
Right. And then, I should have followed up. I should have been like, yes, put together your 3-minute speech for the school board. Right. And so like taking those moments to say, sometimes we're already doing the lesson, but then the kids don't get the connection of like, okay, I'm doing this, but it's not going to go anywhere. Like showing them and it can go somewhere, I think is a big thing.
I think what makes that work in the capstone context is rather as a teacher, we're framing up essential questions. And essential questions usually have this knowledge output. Changing those to actionable questions not only puts kids on the hook, it puts us on the hook, right? That action is the expected output. Like, not like, hey, like what is this historical event about? But how can you make that actionable? That could be in history. It could be like, what is the best way to represent X event in history in a museum or in a textbook? And then to follow up with that action piece. So, yeah, I think sometimes we've become so accustomed to these knowledge outputs that then we got to kind of pause and think like, what do we do about it? And it's a whole extra step and a different type of thinking. And it's actually like an agentic thinking, right? But if you do that from the get-go, the actionable question like forces you into that.
Yeah, and you'll learn the knowledge along the way. All right, so we got to wrap this up. And I like to do like a question of the season. I'm saying that as if there's like so many seasons to this podcast. This is just season 2. So this is the season 2 question I wanted to ask all the guests. If you could redesign school from the ground up, just kind of like it could be rewriting a rule or a norm in education, or it could just be like, redesigning the way we do school to make it more equitable. What would your ideal redesign of school include?
Yeah, I mean, this is not going to be a surprise where I'm going with this. So like, when we think about curriculum and pedagogy and space, right? We're constantly thinking about like skills and knowledge, skills and knowledge, skills and knowledge. And so like what I'd like to see is, curriculum built not on knowledge outputs and skill outputs, but what kind of agency are we cultivating? And what's the evidence for that agency? And I think that's a very reasonable, I'm an idealist, but that's a very reasonable shift. And I think goes way back to like Freire and Dewey and all these educational theorists.
Yeah.
And we're living in a time, we need a whole whole generation of actors to fix the problems
Absolutely.
that we've got. And
I mean, isn't that the
I
truth
think, like,
for every time? I mean, community is always changing and evolving. And when community changes and evolves, like the inequities and the equities are changing, right? And so we're always going to have this need to push towards fairness. We'll
yeah,
never arrive because our community is not stagnant,
yep,
right? And so there'll
yeah,
always be imbalances and balances and imbalance, and we always need people ready to step up and help to move it towards balance, right?
yeah. I think, like, too often it's like, okay, after I get the stuff I have to teach them, I'll do this extra thing.
Mm,
And I'd like to see a system built on the extra thing,
yes.
right? Because that's where people's hearts are. That's what it means to be a human. That's how we bring about greater justice in this world.
I love that. So start with the agency piece. Be like, you know what? We're going to fight for something. We're going to fix some kind of injustice that you see in our school. In order to do that, you're going to have to learn how to ask a question. You're going to learn you have to research. You have to be able to read. You have to be able to write. You have to be able to have an opinion. You need to be able to synthesize a plan. So like
To people. Yep.
all your speaking, listening, all of your standards are grounded in this like final agent project, right? And so we will hit all your standards. You will learn math. You will be able to compute statistics, right? When
That's
you
right.
are solving the answer to this question,
Yeah,
you will learn all your computer technology. Every skill will be there. Trust me.
You never have to, you'll never get that question, why are we doing this?
No,
They'll
for
know.
sure. They'll know because they're the one driving it. They're in the driving seat of their own education.
Yeah.
I mean,
or when am I going to use this? You're using
sign
it
me
right
up.
now.
I want to go to school like that. I want to work in a school like that. I want my kids to be in a school like that. Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be amazing.
absolutely.
This has been just an amazing conversation for everything you're doing for your students. I mean, all the work that you've done to help them just be in the driver's seat of their education, the inquiry, the advocacy work they've done, the global studies, the global citizenship. There's no doubt in my mind, you, Seth Brady, are an equity teacher leader, and we are so lucky to learn from you today.
It's really been a pleasure. And, I want to get together after this and talk what this is, at elementary level, because I think there's just so much to talk about.
Love that. You are invited to come hang out with me and my elementary kids and run them through one of your inquiry models. Let me know what day you're free, and I will right on my calendar, and you can go ahead and test it out on that because they're ready, man. They're pumped.
That sounds awesome.
Do big things. Set it up. All right. Well, it's been great. Thank you.